The New York State Department of Transportation presents the DOT POD.
And welcome in to the DOT POD. I'm Josh Heller.
And I'm Anya Cardos.
And we are delighted to have you joining us. Well, our guest today is a familiar face here at the DOT's main office and a person who is vital to our mission for strengthening New York's transportation infrastructure, as well as meeting the needs of the traveling public and communities across the state.
We are thrilled to engage in a conversation today with Janet Ho, NYSDOT's Assistant Commissioner for Finance and Integrated Modal Services. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming by.
We've been so excited to have you on today. Thanks for joining us.
So we mentioned your title, Assistant Commissioner for Finance and Integrated Modal Services, which means, I'm not sure, what does that mean? What does that office cover? So I guess what are your responsibilities here?
So I am responsible for the finance, budget, and accounting. They all report up through my chain. And then integrated modal services is just a fancy way of saying that we oversee the bureaus that deal with, I will call it, transportation modes other than highway. So aviation, passenger and freight rail, and public transportation or transit. So.
I think that's actually important because I do think a lot of people, when they think DOT, think cars, right? Think highways, think roads, think bridges, and that's fair. But it's more than that. It's a lot more than that, and you are knee deep in that.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I do think that obviously we deal a lot with highway here at the department, and it's important. It's a huge function. And actually, I probably should say we also at Integrated Modal Services oversee the relationships with local municipalities and their highway programs. So we do help out there. But right, aviation is a huge piece of transportation. We run a lot of grant programs out of my area. So rail grants, as I mentioned, aviation grants, and the public transit grants. There's a lot of money. It all comes down to money, which is really why people know me. It's really about money because usually they're stopping me in the hall being like, so I have a project that I need to do. Do you have money to help us do it? So it's just about the dollar. I know. I need one of those money guns. The ones that like shoot out fake money everywhere. Just so that randomly I can like whip it out of my pocket and kind of be like, what? You want money? What? And it just like flies out.
You would be the most popular employee here.
Exactly.
If you're not already. So let's start by talking about your background prior to getting here, going to school. So you went to school for and psychology, criminology, law and society at the University of California, Irvine. Did you expect to be working for Department of Transportation?
Oh, I totally didn't expect to be working for the Department of Transportation. And anyone who actually looked at me and saw me originally when I was going to school for those things, I totally thought, okay, well, maybe I'm going to go into law enforcement. It's like, really, you're 5'2". But I'm one of those fluffy people that as you go through your school career and you have your life experiences, sometimes opportunities just open up. And sometimes the path you take, you never know where you're going to land. And transportation is where I landed, and not in law enforcement.
I'll be honest. I went to college initially as a physics major. I wanted to major in astrophysics and astronomy because I find it fascinating. I still find it fascinating, but I found out very quickly I'm not smart enough for that.
Oh, don't
play
yourself.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
Well, you landed here at the department.
Exactly. I made it one semester.
Physics totally still makes sense at the Department of Transportation.
Listen, and you know what? I'm perfectly happy with that.
So you grew up in California, but you ended up in New York State. What was your path? You grew up in the Bay Area, and how did all that work out where you came to join us here?
Yeah, so it is interesting because, right, I grew up in the Bay Area, and I don't know how many folks really know California geography, but Irvine actually is in Southern California, whereas Bay Area is kind of more Northern California. So even going to school for undergrad, it was definitely still like a 5 or 6 hour drive, depending on traffic, to get back home. So I think some of it was just wanting to get out there, see the world, get a little separation from the the parents, and see how things worked. I think we just addressed I thought I was going to go down like a law enforcement or maybe forensic psychology path. Didn't go down that route. Actually, I think maybe kind of what led me here is in my last year at the University of California, Irvine, there was an internship program that was set up where you obviously you would get class credits for going to intern at, choose a location. And obviously at that point, my interest was law enforcement. So I had actually reached out to the LAPD to see if they had any sort of internships. And fascinating. I actually landed one at their training facility. So this is where their police academy essentially. And it was interesting. At the time, they were coming out of trying to implement requirements with the Department of Justice, actually, with respect to proper policing, community policing, coming out of some of the scandals that they had in the 90s. And so they actually assigned me to audit some of the classes, look at the class curriculum to make sure that they were covering some of those mandates that they needed to be covering. And then so I would sit in on classes sometimes. And then from there, they were kind of like the people at the academy were like, if you're going to pursue grad school, it'd be great if you looked at public administration. And that's how I ended up looking at public administration programs kind of around the country. Decided I wanted to explore more here at New York. Ended up in a public administration program at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and completed that. And one of my professors there, when I was looking for that first job out of grad school, had a contact in the Assembly Ways and Means Committee.
Right, and so that is where you started your career. So talk about, fresh out of college, green as can be. Going into Assembly, that has to be quite an eye-opening experience.
It is a little bit, although I think they try to tell you what you're in for, especially like coming out of it when they make the job offer, and they're kind of like, well, you're okay with long hours, right? Like you understand that there may be times, especially during budget, when you will be up until 4 a.m. in the morning, and you will be required to stay at the office until that time and just put in the hours. And you're always kind of like, yeah, because you need your job and you need a way to pay the bills. And you're like, yeah, that sounds great. I'll do it. And you do it. But it is true. Like there were times, certainly, I'm not ashamed to admit, I totally slept under my desk at the Assembly because we were on call, needed to be there. And it was during budget negotiations. You never knew when a meeting was going to get called. And yes, there are times I remember walking back to my apartment. It was like I got released from work at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Sun's coming out.
The sun's coming out. And they're like, yeah, we'll see you again at 9:30. And you're like, oh, that sounds so not great.
It sounds like baptism by fire, basically.
A little bit.
It also sounds like a young person's game.
It's totally a young person's game.
But it sounds thrilling at the same time.
Yep, you learn a lot. And the budget process is an eye-opening process. We're going through it right now. Obviously, my role is different. I no longer have to sleep under my desk here at the office. It's
Unless
awesome.
Unless you want to.
But do I want to?
Yes.
Not really.
We've all thought about it.
But just monitoring. And actually, though, just the environment has come a long way since then. When I first started, Zoom, other video conferencing capabilities wasn't really a common thing. Mm-hmm. So you did need to be there in person. I think now it is different. I still have friends who do it, and, they were like, yep. For some of those late nights video conference. Sometimes they definitely do a lot of in person, but there's definitely more openness to doing some things remote, especially coming out of COVID. But that's a whole different trial by fire that everybody went through.
So working in the Ways and Means Committee there, working on the budgets, has that, did that help shape you as far as what you do now and what you did once you started, working with, in the governor's office and agency? We'll get into that in a sec, but, did that kind of help shape what you do now?
Oh, absolutely. When I first started doing budget, it's interesting because everyone's like, oh, you'll see. It's not just numbers and finance and accounting. There's a lot of policy that goes into deciding what goes into the budget. And when you are helping to develop it, in any respect, whether you are involved on the legislative side, working for the Assembly or the Senate, or whether you work for the Division of Budget, whether you work in the governor's office or here at any of the agencies, you just start to learn a little bit more about what are we investing in at the agency. That drives policy, right? Where are you putting your money? And all of those things flow together to kind of show you what your agency does, and you learn it, and you have, as you're kind of like asking questions about this part of the budget or that part of the budget or this particular program, why do they want to fund it more? I don't understand why they want to fund it more. So, you get a larger picture of things.
Is that where you use your psychology degree? And you're like, oh,
perhaps.
I would imagine that comes in handy a lot. So you take what you've learned while you were working in the Assembly and Senate and in the governor's office, and then you move it into the DMV, your position there. What was that role, and how did you work with safety, compliance, and programs like that?
My role at DMV. It was a little bit evolving. When I first joined the DMV, it was to be for what they called policy and planning at that time. So, I think I managed legislative affairs and government affairs. So right, that was kind of my tie-in back to my old life, working with the legislature, handling questions, really it was the staff who worked there, tracking legislation, doing all of those things, but also had, some programs that I inherited at DMV that ultimately ended up getting rolled out. So worked through the Real ID rollout, which was fun. That was kind of trial by fire, actually. There was a lot more, we'll maybe call it information technology aspects to implementation than maybe you think about when you hear about, hey, I'm going to get a new driver's license that's Real ID compliant. How does that work? But yeah, we had this whole thing like, is the system programmed right to produce these new identification cards? Is all your information transferring correctly as people update and we move from one system to another? So are we getting, actually, here's a communications aspect to things, which is, are we getting the word out there correctly? All of those things that you need to take into consideration. And it's just fascinating, right? That's all things that you learn that maybe you didn't have experience before. When I first came to a state agency, so the Department of Motor Vehicles, that you learn a lot about. And then over the course of my time there, through several different, maybe we'll call them reorganizations, I ended up having responsibility for, that was the safety aspect. So governor's traffic safety. They have the whole education campaign and additional grants that they put out to state agencies, to nonprofits, to traffic safety organizations, things like AAA to fund, education about how to be safer.
So you come over here to DOT, but prior to that, when you were with the governor's office, you worked, I assume, with DOT. What was your level of work with, this agency even before you came to this agency, and did that influence you in coming here?
Yeah, was there a big tie-in there for you?
It was actually, I think, a little bit. Coming back to DOT is a little bit like, I don't know if I want to say coming home, but it was definitely a familiarity with some of the topics. When I was in the governor's office, my title was, I think it was Assistant Secretary for Transportation. So obviously worked closely with and kind of oversaw the Department of Transportation here, Department of Motor Vehicles, worked with the MTA, tangentially with the Port Authority, and kind of all of those transportation agencies. There were air quotes there that nobody could see, but it was a little bit, like I said, like coming home. When I was in the governor's office, obviously we did a little bit more project tracking, doing more infrastructure things. When I went to DMV, and just wanting to go to a state agency and kind of learn, how do you actually implement things, right? So I guess maybe we'll go through the chronology. When you're at the Senate or the Assembly, you're kind of a step removed, right? Maybe you're definitely involved in policy, you're helping drive decisions, in my particular position about what got funded and helping legislators make those recommendations for how to fund agencies. But you're still a step removed, right? It's policy. This is what we would like you to do, but you're not necessarily seeing all of the guts, so to speak, of what goes on day to day in agency life, public service. Then went to the governor's office ultimately. And again, high level, you're looking at policy. You're trying to help drive the governor's agenda for what they want to do, help them realize the transportation vision that they have for themselves. But again, high level, there's a lot of, this is what we would like to do, agencies, and can you tell us how you think it needs to be implemented? And after a while of doing that, you're kind of like, well, I think I kind of want to round myself out. And you kind of want to be, what is it like to be boots on the ground? Although, admittedly, I'm not boots on the ground. I've never driven a snowplow, although as I properly shouldn't, as I don't hold a CDL. But I was going to say that, when you're in an agency, that's when you really have to put your hat on with the, how do we make this happen? This is what the policy is. This is what, whether it be legislature indicating it, whether it be the governor, here's where we are, where we're being told to go, and how do you get there? And that's what we work on here at the agency.
Is it helpful at all that you have that almost 10,000-foot view from when you were with legislature and with the governor's office, instead of, being able to kind of see both sides of it, having, okay, this is what needs to get done, but ultimately knowing, all right, yeah, I ultimately know what they're looking for and how those decisions are made at that level as well. Does that help you at all?
I do think so. I think it helps. If I was to try to better articulate it, I don't know that I could, but yeah, it's more just kind of like that one step back, keep your eyes on the prize. It's like, you have to see the forest, not just the trees.
I was going to say, it's not harder to better articulate than what I say. That's pretty
Our Commissioner Dominguez, she always says we're much more than just bridges and pavement. We're about the people that we serve. What are some of the initiatives that you're seeing going on right now that are going to or are having a direct impact on the driving public or communities across the state?
Yeah, I guess not
really
even just the driving public, but just the public at large,
yeah.
especially with the multimodal type of
Multimodal,
transportation.
we've got, yes. Talk about some of the things that we might see in a few years from now that maybe we haven't thought about.
I absolutely think at the end of the day, we are public servants, right? We are paid with public funds, and I think we all kind of go into this career, hopefully, I hope, with at least some small kernel of our heart, wanting to help and serve the public. And there is a lot, I think, going on right now where we are trying to maybe bring ourselves back to that, bring ourselves back to our roots. We've always done it. We always have done it. We just maybe haven't articulated it as well as we could have. And we're looking to do that now. There's just a little bit more tension. It's the dialogue maybe that's changed, even though the core mission of what we do and how we serve the public is still at its heart kind of the same. But just with renewed focus, bringing it back so that we do remember that what we are trying to do is help communities and meet them where they are. And I think that there's a lot of programs ongoing where we get the opportunity to do that, or where we're looking at plans to be able to do that. And again, actually, I'll bring it back to the modes, whether it be aviation. We've got the upstate airport competition projects that are rolling out now, and we've seen those kick off at Albany Airport, at Syracuse International Airport, at Ogdensburg, and Binghamton. So you have investment going on all throughout the state in airports. You have where we're kicking off planning about how we improve rail. So we have the Empire Corridor that where we're always kind of looking to see how do we improve the passenger experience, how do we help cut down kind of on the time frame with infrastructure projects that we're planning for. We have all those things in the works. Livingston Avenue Bridge is a big rail project. It's a key connector right over between Albany and Rensselaer to allow train traffic to move, not just passenger, but freight rail traffic to move over the river for anything north and west of Albany.
And pedestrians and cyclists
Exactly,
as well.
which it'll have a shared use path component. We have a solicitation which is being evaluated right now for transportation alternatives, CMAQ and CRP, and all of those projects that ultimately will be awarded and where we're directing investment will go toward active transportation projects, projects that will have some sort of emissions reductions goals. So all these things, there's a lot going on in the department right now that I think is just fascinating. Hopefully, ultimately, at the end of the day, once the projects are delivered, we have things going on to better integrate communities, to better improve their way of life, and just serve the public.
CMAQ and CRP
Uh-huh.
stand for?
Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, and then CRP is the Carbon Reduction Program.
Gotcha.
Thank you for handling the acronym.
Acronym alerts.
I
We
know,
try to.
I'm sorry.
There's a lot of acronyms going on.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So obviously you are a busy person within the walls of this building and outside.
Even
because
when you're not sleeping in your office.
Yeah, even when you're not. Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm just curious, what do you do to unwind? I know you've got a cute little dog.
I do. She's a little black dog named Mika.
I've seen pictures of her. She's adorable.
Yeah, she totally has a underbite. She's a strange mix of, I will admit, pug and chihuahua. So yes, the super lazy combined with the super hyper, it turns out rather moderate, actually. You're okay. But
You also like to cook with friends. You like
I do.
Is that something you do to unwind and just sort of like let the days, these are monumental projects. I would imagine you need to kind of walk away for
especially
a
during
little
budget
while.
season.
Yeah.
I know. Time with friends. When I get back, most of my family's in California.
Yeah.
I try to make it back to visit. But yeah, I love to host. I probably don't do it as much as I would like to work, but work-life balance, we all still strive to find it. But yeah, absolutely love to cook, do all those things, have friends over. But yeah, I guess that's mostly it. Spend time with the dog. I admit when I'm out of here, I'm pretty lazy. I probably shouldn't admit that.
Why? It's one of life's greatest joys, I think.
Agreed.
Sitting on the couch.
Inertia is the natural state
Yeah,
of
I
being.
agree.
Just gotta say,
Yeah. I get it.
You earned it. You've
definitely earned it, Janet.
Well, Janet, again, as we said at the beginning, thank you so much for taking some time and sitting with us and letting people. We're trying to pull back the curtain, as we've said, on DOT and especially when it comes to government entities. Sometimes it can be nameless and faceless, but we're not. We have names.
No.
You have
that is why you have the podcast, right?
That's
like
what
you
it's
are
here
trying
for.
to put, if not a face, because you don't necessarily see us,
the face.
at least a voice
True.
to
Yeah.
the
True.
names
Yeah.
to bring living color.
Well,
And we
thanks.
thank you for providing that for us.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
sure.
again, we do know you're extremely busy, especially this time of year. So we appreciate you carving out some time to sit down and chat. Thank you. Always fun to again put a voice to the name, as it were, Anya, and a really good one today.
And it's great to see what are some of the inner workings. What are some of the projects that our folks are working on, and what does it mean to them? And what are they trying to convey to the public?
No question.
That's really critical stuff.
No question. Well, thank you, Evan, again for tuning in. We will be back right back here on the DOT BOD.